Okay, the headlines. I had the pleasure of speaking with Ali Salifu, Mike Timko at WPI, that's Worcester Polytechnic Institute, and we talked about turning bamboo into biofuel. Exciting prospects, I think. Last time we spoke about recycling and we spoke about plastics, and I came across this article from Business Insider. Microplastics discovered in human blood are unsettling. I would certainly say so. And the scientists are trying to figure out whether they are harmful. Now, microplastics, you may know, they have been found at the top of Mount Everest. They have been found in the Mariana Trench, in food, in drinking water, human placentas, and baby bottles. And now they have been discovered in human blood for the first time. Now, of 22 healthy adults, was in a Dutch study, was published last week in the journal Environment International. 17 of those 22 had plastic particles in their blood. And Maya Lamourie, and Maya is a chemist at the Vrije Universiteit, she said, it is really too early to say whether it is safe or not. If you like this program, hit that button subscribe and hit that button like. Thank you. Okay, now if you ask me, if you ask a lot of people, what are the biggest challenges for climate change and for the environment, they will say the war or the invasion of Ukraine. According to articles, Ukraine and the Russia's war on Ukraine, Upends Arctic climate change research. So that's one problem there. Advisors Edge is talking about Ukraine war reveals flaws in ESG investing. And we talk about soaring commodity prices combined with the social, humanitarian impact. Many investors are asking how the conflict will affect the environmental and the social and the governance landscape. The Washington Post is talking about the US, and it's saying that Biden's chance to tackle climate change is fading amid global energy upheaval. It's a very clear article in my eyes. They say that the war in Ukraine has raised oil prices and launched Western leaders, including Boris Johnson, on a global hunt for new sources of energy. Not very good in the eyes of environmentalists. Obviously, they have tried to move the US away from fossil fuels, but their renewable energy, renewable power is just not there at this moment at a lower cost. The US itself, White House, said that the war in Ukraine was a reason for American oil and gas producers to step up and get more supply out of the ground in their own country. Okay, now Guterres, he said that instead of hitting the brakes on the decarbonization of the global economy, it is really the time to put the pedal to the metal towards a renewable energy future. Which brings me to my interview with Ali Salifu and Mike Timko, and that is at the Department of Biology and Biotechnology, Worcester Polytechnic Institute. And they talk about turning bamboo into biofuels. What is it I know about bamboo? Well, it is a grass. It is fast growing. It grows in places where other vegetation doesn't grow. And it is resilient. It is great for the environment. And according to this article, it is a simple and yet cost-effective process. And they talk about the implications on the biofuel industry. It sounds very promising. Let's find out more about these statements, as well as about the cost, about the land versus fuel debate, and with every other nation trying to move away from Russian oil, how far away are we from implementing this particular method?
But the single biggest thing is you can get roughly 10 times higher growth rate for bamboo than you can for corn stover. What that means then is you have more biomass per unit area, which means you don't have to transport the biomass nearly so far, which means you can have bigger factories, and bigger factories you get about economies of scale. So we live here in Massachusetts that has rocky acidic soils and not a very good climate, and we can't kill the stuff that's there, and it'll grow much taller than head height in a single growing season.
One of the first pro for using bamboo, as Mike mentioned, is the fact that it's not competing with food. You go through a series of steps to be able to get access to the cellulose and the hemicellulose. But for our technique, we just crush it and then, basically mill it with the ball milling. which is a lab scale equipment, but for scaling up, you can use a bigger machine. So we mill it up and then get access to the cellulose and the hemicellulose, which is what makes it simple. In terms of the cost to the environment, our process is not only simple, but it's also environmentally friendly. But the first process that we have been able to do is to get the sugars, which is the rate limiting step. Again, going too technical, but it's the step that is needed before you can get your ethanol out. So without the sugars, you cannot get any ethanol. And then by using our method, we're able to simplify the process. And then if you compare the cost that is involved in removing the waste that you're generating from using these other methods, it reduces the cost involved in using our method and using bamboo for making biofuel.
It's a really hard problem. So I guess if anybody says they have, an answer and it's right for all those places, they probably oversimplified. Folks will find ways of taking advantage of technologies and systems that are in place. So we need to be careful. We need to tread lightly.
Usually there are lands sometimes that even though some farmers are growing crops on, they're not economically viable. So we are also thinking about, okay, can those lands be diverted into growing bamboo? So if you use those lands for bamboo, which doesn't require a lot of resources to grow, then those lands could be used.
You've got this competition, if you will, or balance between, on the one side, the very valuable but very small quantities, and on the other side, you've got very low cost but huge markets. And the best example of that is energy or fuels.
I know growing up from Ghana, one of the issues was with power supply and a lot of businesses closing down because of constant power supplies, and then they have to rely on generators. And that makes it very expensive for them to run their businesses, and the businesses collapse. So if we can find ways of harnessing all these things and then putting them together and making governments to see the benefit of investing or supporting the activities of using bamboo for biofuels, I think it will go a long way. So I go around to Africa in different countries and I just see vast lands lying around and nothing is going on. So that could potentially be used to grow bamboo.
I think that means that we need to be more aggressive in terms of upscaling these technologies.